Hi, this is Mark Johnson, and I am the producer, or one of the producers, of the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I'm here with Michael Apted, our director.
Yes, I'm Michael Apted, and this was my initiation into the Narnia Chronicles.
I've also produced both the first two films, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Prince Caspian. And one of the challenges we had with this film is to, one, give the audience something completely different, but keep in the spirit of the first two films, and in particular, the very first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because we thought that best underscored the magic and the wonder and the awe-inspiration of Narnia and really the joys that this series of films could have. And Michael, who had really nothing to do with the first two films, was able to pick up and embrace what we had already done and yet make it his own film. It was a huge challenge, I think, and Michael came through with flying colors.
Yeah, I think the key words were fantasy, magic, color. That's what we were looking for. But the beginning of the film here, I think what I wanted to do was to make it rather gray and dull looking, because I wanted to set the table for when we finally entered into Narnia. So there's a kind of subdued colors about this, which is not really what the agenda is for the main film, but it would give me a contrast when you went into the blazing sunshine of Narnia.
That's true. You notice there are no bright colors here at all, in contrast to Narnia. And when we get to the Dawn Treader, the ship itself, with all those brilliant purples and reds and the blue of the sea, it's part of what we did also with The Lion, the Witch, when we went into the wardrobe and opened up to a completely different world. It's a little bit like the Wizard of Oz, where you have one world and you find yourself all of a sudden in a completely different one.
And by the way, before we get too far into the film, just talk a bit about the aspect ratio of it, which is a 16:9. I felt that on television it's more intimate. You feel more part of the film when you're looking at it in this rather more square ratio. This film had quite a lengthy pre-production. There was quite a gap between Prince Caspian and this, and the children, if you can call them children now, were growing all the time. We'd cast Eustace quite early on, and he had to wait a year pretty much before he did anything. But I started the whole process by doing some rehearsal. We got together for a couple of weeks. We shot the film in Australia, in Queensland, and I brought all the actors in, and we went through the script. We had our writer with us, Michael Petroni, and Mark was there too. And we went through all this stuff. We talked about each scene, we moved it around a bit, and then in the afternoon, to vary things, we would go off and do fencing practice or swimming practice, which, as you'll see soon, we much needed. So it was a question to really reorientate everybody into the whole kind of Narnia culture.
And what we just saw, the character we just saw, Eustace, is our significant new cast member, Will Poulter, who joined the world of Narnia and didn't skip a beat. And those of us who have seen the film over and over again are just completely we have such respect for the job that he did. And as you see, as the film goes along, he really is one character, becomes another, and then becomes another version of the first character. These children, the four of them we just saw there, I met when they were really young. For instance, Lucy, who you now see reading the letter, is 14 there. When I first met her, when we cast her, she was 7, and she was 8 years old when we did The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Skander was a young imp. I think he was about 11 or 12, and just full of energy and pranks, and now he's a young man, and as we're speaking here, he's in school at Cambridge.
You caught a glimpse of Anna Popperwell from the first one, Susan. There's little moments where the two older children come back, just in sense to remind us of the family and whatever.
Yeah, and in Narnia, for those of you who aren't familiar with the world, at some point you outgrow Narnia, and so the two older Pevensey children, who were well established in both The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Prince Caspian, in effect don't appear in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and then we see what happens to the two younger siblings by the end of the story. But Michael came up, I think, with a really clever way of reminding an audience that has seen the other two films, what's become of Peter and Susan, and yet not make them a significant part of this film.
So this is Eustace, and the fine line that Will trod really was Eustace is supposed to be a real pain during the beginning of the film, a really obnoxious person. And yet he's not so obnoxious you never want to see him again. I think what Will brought to it is a kind of warmth, even when he's been nasty. So although you're supposed to dislike him as much as the Pevensey children do, you're never unhappy to see him show up scene after scene. And I think that was a great achievement on his part. You could imagine someone else playing it and just being nasty, and you think, oh, I don't want to see him again. But as we'll learn throughout the movie, Eustace is really central to the whole emotional development of the film.
And I think, Michael, you did something clever with Will, because the first time we saw the film, or saw his performance in the first half of it, he was perhaps just a little bit too strident. So you picked other takes in which he wasn't quite as obnoxious as he could be. And then I believe you may have softened him a little bit in terms of the sound mix. Yeah,
a little bit. But again, I wanted him to make a long journey in the film, to start out being pretty obnoxious and then to become heroic. On the DVD, there's a whole section describing this scene, that we show you how we made it. What we don't show you really was how tricky it was for the children to do, how much practice they had to do, how they had to go scuba diving to learn how to hold their breath underwater and all this. And, we had quite a tough time. Lucy got a little sick. Georgie was a bit sick with a cold and a cough. And so she really had to struggle to get through some of this stuff. But I think we asked a lot of them here.
We did. At the same time, I can't help but think about it. What a great job. You get to go to a beautiful place in Australia, and you get swimming and diving lessons, and learn how to sword fight, and be in the middle of a great big motion picture like this. And yet, at the same time, you're absolutely right, Michael. It was very hard and pretty demanding. And we did ask that the children do some diving and stay underwater for a while, which is not that easy.
I wanted to make the audience know that they'd actually gone through this experience, that it was tough and dangerous. So this is our first look at one of the inanimate stars of the movie, the boat, the Dawn Treader, which looks as though it was a good sail ship, but in fact never went to water. I remember when I got the job, the first thing you thought about, how am I going to shoot all this stuff in the water? So I went to see some colleagues, talked to some colleagues who'd done films, Peter Weir, who'd done Master and Commander, Gore Verbinski, who'd done Pirates of the Caribbean, and they said to me, if you can avoid going to sea, avoid it.
And yet, nobody, from what we can tell, nobody actually was able to avoid it except for us. And take some of the mystique or some of the magic away from this film, but the truth of the matter, we never had this boat on water. And yet, I think what you've done in an hour and a half, we are convinced that our Dawn Treader is seaworthy.
Yeah, I mean, the computer technology on water is so good now that in shots like this, when you're looking over it, at the sea, there's, I think, every feeling that the boat is moving, it's going through water. And again, there's another section, I think, on the DVD which explains how we did the boat, how we found another boat exactly the same size and went out and filmed that so we got the right sort of wake and the right sort of motion, and then put on the computerized version of the Dawn Treader in the big wide shots, which we'll see.
And Reepicheep, the mouse, is also one of the stellar characters from this film, and the relationship that he has with Will Poulter, with Eustace, is really remarkable, and it has great growth to it. And keep in mind that the bulk of the time that Will was acting, he was not acting with there was no Reepicheep. There was what we call a stuffy, that's a stand-in, and we hadn't even picked the voice yet, Simon Pegg, of Reepicheep. So it's very hard to give a performance to an inanimate object, not knowing what that character is going to look like, or indeed what that character sounds like.
I mean, this boat really looks at sea, doesn't it? I mean, I think it's magical what could be done. And now again, this is one of the sets. This is the stateroom, and Again, a challenge for us was we never go to Narnia in this film at all. I mean, in the first two, you were in New Zealand, in Eastern Europe, and it were beautiful locations, but we didn't have that. Narnia in our film really is the boat. And so we took enormous care with all the dressing here. You see these pictures on the wall. These are images from the previous films. The whole history of Narnia is contained really within this room. There's a beautiful rendition of Aslan over Caspian's shoulder, but all the way around there's lots of icons from the history of the series and the history of Narnia. And this was our floating Narnia, and the work on it is immaculate. And it was all done in Australia by Australian craftsmen, the painting, the carpentry. Again, we really spared no expense on this to give it this kind of excellent and really beautiful royal look.
It's interesting because, as you say, there are these dioramas behind the characters, really showing their history in Narnia, and you just get a glimpse of them. It's one of the, I think, the real hallmarks of our production design team, that they are so thorough. There are all sorts of things that the audience barely picks up on, but gives, I think, almost a subconscious sense of naturalism, or indeed of Narnia, throughout the thing.
7 Lords of Talmar.
And you notice that we slightly changed Ben Barnes' Caspian accent in this. We were shooting in Australia, where largely English-speaking actors, and so the people we were casting were going to use English as the Telemarine language, whereas in Caspian, Middle European language was really Telemarine, so we changed that. I don't think people worried about it. No one mentioned it to me. Ben was a little bit disturbed, but I think he saw the point that, we wanted to use English as Telemarine since we were actually shooting in an English-speaking country.
Ben Barnes, who of course initiated the character of Caspian in Prince Caspian, had played him with what we called a Mediterranean accent, somewhere between Spanish and Italian and French. And he so understood that character that way that when Michael said, "You know what, I want you to come back as Caspian, but I don't want to do that accent," it was very off-putting. And honestly, for a moment there, he thought it was some sort of criticism of what he had done with Caspian before. And it was really just a different take. And I would say probably after a week of playing him with an English accent, he really felt liberated and felt much more comfortable with it. And in fact, I have not heard a soul point out that what happened to Caspian's accent.
There was a great shot here early on which started on the water and went powering through the boat, and that shot took us the best part of a day to do. We had all sorts of wires and rigs, and of course it was done on dry land, and so you can imagine the amount of, I think this took nearly a year to really accomplish the shot, that big establishing shot. But again, here's another example really of, how good the mouse is. I love what the animators did with it. Every little gesture, every detail is so perfect. All I did was just explain to them what the character's attitude was, what sort of mouse he was, and the inflections that we worked out with the actor, with Simon Pegg, and then the animators take it off and just turn this into a really believable three-dimensional character.
This sequence is when I watch the film now, it's the one that reminds me of what a wonderful score that David Arnold did. And he's a new composer. We had a different composer on the first 2 films, and Michael had worked with David Arnold before and suggested that we bring David on. And I think he did a wonderful job of really segueing from the sort of what I'll call the classic Narnian score, and then making it his own, and yet paying allegiance to some of the key moments.
Yes, he used some of the original score as well, some of the themes. We saw some naiads, some sort of mermaids off the boat at the beginning of this scene, which was another attempt really to bring as much fantasy and colour and magic to it. I mean, I don't think they were even necessarily part of the story at all, but we just wanted to, whenever we could, to add that little element of, gorgeous unreality, if you want.
That's exactly right, and it really does complement or suggest what the magic of Narnia around them. But then you also introduced them. I know you fought for them because we see this friendly wave from Lucy to the naiads and back, and when she encounters them another time, they give her a warning that gives her and indeed us, the audience, a real sense of danger that's about to come.
Mm-hmm. But again, it's just part of the whole magic that we wanted to put in. And we saw the boys fighting before, and again, that's, tricky stuff. And we had a wonderful stunt coordinator, Alan Poppleton, and the boys and Lucy, I think, really got into it. They had lots of fencing. And of course, we had some incidents, some accidents, and all this sort of stuff that go with it. It's all very hair-raising.
I can't remember the mock fight between Caspian and Edmund. What was it? Was it Edmund? Was it Skander who overstepped his bounds?
I think so. I think he gave him a whack, not intentionally, but I think he did.
A fat lip.
And it's difficult stuff to do. So again, one of the main decisions that we made was that all the stuff with the boat, although the boat wasn't in the water, the boat was on dry ground and it was out there, which meant we had to deal with all the wind and the rain and whatever, and you can see in this scene how the wind is ruffling their clothes and all that, but I just thought it would give such a huge reality to it. We could have shot this stuff, I suppose, in a studio where it would have all been warm and cozy, but we did it outside, and I remember we had this complicated schedule, so whatever weather it was, we could do any specific scene. So the film had a kind of variety to it in the way it looked, so everything wasn't in sunshine. If we had a wet day or a cloudy day, then we knew which scenes we wanted to be shooting during that. But that was a bit of a risk, because you get, where we were off the Queensland coast, you get a lot of wind and a lot of rain, and we could have been blown off this thing. But again, I think the decision to shoot as much of it outside pays off. It's got a sort of vitality to it.
I have to say that I was against the idea of never going to sea. I never thought it would work, and I just thought at some point we had to do it, and I was completely wrong. We had, just as Michael was talking about, the opportunity to adjust to whatever the weather was and turn the ship around and be able to pick up another scene or start another one and come back to the other one, depending on where the sun and the wind and whatever the time of day was. It's really remarkable, that kind of control.
And this set here, this Lone Island thing, was pretty much built from the ground up, and a lot of it was just visual effects, extensions and whatever. We had built a very small quayside on an inlay near the studios, and there were boats shunting out all the time and having to be yelled at to get out of the way. And this particular set here, this big stuff here, we built on the back lot. So it was an interesting mixture of going out on locations and having some real places, and then also using the back lot to build stuff again, so you got that outdoors quality without having to travel a lot. Because I think on the earlier films, you went all over the world, didn't you, shooting it?
That's right. This film, it's interesting because we traveled much less, hardly at all. We stayed in one place, really, except for a couple of second unit shots. And yet I think this film looked bigger than the first two, in which we traveled really all over the world.
Yeah, I suppose in a way, because we were in a sort of slightly surrealistic world. I mean, we weren't really in real places. The islands we went to and the places they visited were all, kind of from the imagination. So to have a blank page and to be able to build them from scratch or build them with visual effects from scratch was, I think, was helpful. I mean, we didn't have a lot of battles like you had in the previous one, where you needed, really solid, real places to do it in. So it allowed us a bit more opportunity to make some of the settings bizarre, like this one we're in now. You see those wonderful statues with these clerics holding their heads. I think we got this from an idea from some French church, but it's just gives it a kind of other dimension, a rather, unusual look to it.
What's fun here in this scene is the first Lone Islander to come down one of these ropes connected to the bells. We couldn't get them to move fast enough, and it was an attack, but it was a slow attack, and we wanted to make it more dynamic. So we went back to England 6 months after we finished shooting the movie and reshot a stuntman coming down, and then I believe you undercranked it, so it made it appear as though it came even faster. And it starts off this battle with a real jazz, a real pump right now, which we couldn't quite get it to do when we were filming it.
I mean, the shooting of this film was hard work. We didn't have a lot of time. We had a smaller budget than the others, and I think we shot it in between 80 and 90 days, which is pretty fast. And it was hard for us all because, with the children, and the children in every scene, you have them only for 5 hours a day. They have to do schooling, which slightly takes the sheen off being a movie star. They have to have schooling every day. So, it was a hard push, but I like working quickly. And I think that with children or teenagers, I think they lose interest if, we're not working all the time, if they're hanging around. And so I like to keep the film moving, and they sort of responded to that. They liked being engaged in it, liked being involved.